welcome to From the Classroom. I'm Nate Quinnell, Superintendent of Schools here in East Hartford. I'm really thrilled you took the time to tune in. From the Classroom is a show that we shoot where we try to showcase some of the great things going on in East Hartford Public Schools with some of the greatest kids in the state. And we really appreciate the opportunity. We have a special guest today. Our guest today is Amy Peltier. Did I get it right? I've been working on this.
Yes.
Nice. And Amy is our Working Cities project initiative. We call it here in East Hartford Connects. So welcome to the show, Amy, and thanks for being here.
Thanks.
So this is actually officially your second time on the show.
Yes, it is.
Although first time on studio.
Right.
We filmed a segment of a three-part series of Working Cities when we were in the design phase. But I think that was around 2 years ago.
Yes.
So let's start from the beginning, though. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself,
Sure.
who you are, kind of what brought you here, and
Yep.
then let's jump into Working Cities, East Hartford Connects as a whole. So why don't you tell us a little bit,
Sure.
our audience, about you?
I grew up in Connecticut, mostly in West Hartford, and I went to Providence College in Rhode Island. I went kind of all around after that, ended up going to law school in Rhode Island as well. Practiced as an attorney for the state of Massachusetts for 7 years as a public defender. So working with low-income populations around criminal and social justice issues. And after realizing sort of the toll that was taking on me, decided to kind of go back to my roots of community engagement, which I had done before law school. So I currently live in Collinsville, Connecticut. After I left Massachusetts, I started working for the United Way in Hartford.
Yeah.
And
that's where we connected.
and that's right. The United Way is a strong partner and funder of some initiatives with East Hartford Public Schools. I was managing those. The Working Cities Projects was one of my first assignments, and I kind of dove in head first. It's such a cool project with so many neat partners coming to the table to work together on it and help to design the initiative. And when the school district was awarded the grant, came on as director May 2018. It seems like longer than that, but
that's really funny.
Yes.
I mean, I've heard this story. Obviously, I've heard it before, and I've lived it with you. I can remember my first time I met you. We were working on the United Way grant, I believe. It might have had something to do with Working Cities. But I just remember there was this no-nonsense person who was just urgently pressing, and I didn't know the whole public defender story at the time, but it makes sense later on. But we are thrilled, Amy, to have you as part of our team, and really have admired the work that you've been able to evolve. East Hartford Connects has evolved because of you, and the good it's already been able to do in a very short. We feel like 1 year is a long time, but it's really a short time. Has been really remarkable. So for our residents, they may or may not remember when we talked about design. And at the time, I believe we were at a school. We were in the community. We did some different shots. But can you give kind of the elevator speech of what is Working Cities and what is East Hartford Connects?
Sure. So Working Cities is a project of the Boston Federal Reserve Bank that's focused solely on community and economic development. And they look at post-industrial cities in Connecticut, but they also have working cities in Rhode Island and Massachusetts as well. So they kind of identify towns and cities that have an economic growth challenge, largely around workforce development, but also small business development, job seeking, students learning about a work culture in school, and decide to invest in those cities with whatever programs those cities find are a particular fit for their community. So here in East Hartford, where the median income is about $50,000, that's not really a sustainable wage for a family. As you and I might relate to, people with children, I can't imagine being able to cover transportation, healthcare, housing, all of those things for $50,000 a year. So in our design phase, we talked to a lot of people in the community. We had a survey. We talked to almost 200 people. We were largely focused on the Silver Lane neighborhood at that time. But as you know, we've sort of grown to apply to anyone in East Hartford. And we look at three main things for families that are making that $50,000 a year or below. So they're most likely under or unemployed, and we try to help them grow their wealth. And I like to talk about wealth as opposed to just income, because income, people think about getting a job and getting a paycheck and money in their pocket, but wealth also incorporates having a vehicle for your family, starting a savings account for your children's college, being able to afford your bills, going to college, graduating from high school, all of those things. So we like to talk about supporting families in 3 ways. One is workforce development for adults. So we have a lot of partners at the table that support our efforts here. Our one main push, well, I'll hold off on that for a minute.
Yeah.
But I'll talk about workforce development for adults, so connecting adults with employment, but also with opportunities and trainings. As I mentioned, we have a lot of partners. CCAT is a great partner, Goodwin College, Capital Workforce Partners. We promote their opportunities, but we bring residents into our office. They do an intake with us. We see where they're at. We support them in their needs and connect them to opportunities that might help grow the wealth of their family. Right. Our second strategy is around career and workplace learning for students in the public school system. So even starting at kindergarten up through 12th grade. Our office is a converted classroom, talking about from the classroom. We are in a classroom at Silver Lane School. We're situated right next to the Family Resource Center and really in the hub of the community. Silver Lane School is the hub of that neighborhood. Yeah. So we talk to and see families all the time, but we're also talking to the students. Last year we had a career week at Silver Lane that was a week full of activities focusing on a curriculum in their classroom around work competencies like teamwork, communication. These are things you can talk about a 6-year-old in kindergarten with, like you can a 12th grader in high school. And they mean different things at different ages. And we use different community partners to sort of teach those lessons for those different ages. So we really, last week, I'll give another example of our K through 12 work. Last week we worked with CCAT. It was Manufacturing Day here in Connecticut, and we brought 20 middle school girls to a manufacturing mania at Goodwin College. For 6 hours, they got to tour the Advanced Manufacturing Center. They got to speak to employers. They got to do simulated exercises with engineers. It was a super cool event. They got backpacks and T-shirts and all that fun stuff. And then we had 30 high school students go to Stanley Black & Decker's really world-class manufacturing center in downtown Hartford, and it was very similar. They got to have a little reception, engage with engineers, tour the facility, and you know, at the end of those couple hours, their minds are just open to something they had never thought of before. So I think that's really what we're talking about is exposure, but then as they get older, linking them to opportunities and internships and things like that. Right. And our final strategy is really around resident and community engagement. We have several residents that have come together and formed what we call the Resident Advisory Council. And they're kind of like a neighborhood association, for lack of a better term. They set much of the agenda. We connect them with training. We've been able to bring in local trainers to talk to them about community organizing and advocacy and how to do those things. We did a couple series on financial literacy last year where people were pulling their credit reports and looking at how to be financially literate and grow their wealth, like we continue to talk about. And our hope is that they will continue to do this and continue to grow and continue to engage one another and the town in a way that suits them so it's sustainable and that they're bettering their own neighborhood. Okay. But that's another way of growing wealth when you're connected to your community and you want to see it grow. So those are really our 3 main focus areas.
That's comprehensive and huge. And, you know, we think about jobs, we think about obviously our kids and their future, where they see that, and we think about our community as a whole. So Working Cities was a program and a design competition funded by the feds that East Hartford was selected for, and that was something that we all were really, really thrilled about. And from there on, we coined this initiative in East Hartford Connects. And it's funny when we say it, we kind of say both just so people get a frame of reference. Can you talk about why you think East Hartford was selected? There were, I believe, 27 cities in Connecticut originally.
I can't remember the original amount.
Go with 27.
Yeah, 27 sounds great.
And 5 were selected.
And 5 were selected. So of the 5 in Connecticut, East Hartford is joined by Hartford, Middletown, Waterbury, and Danbury, and we're all kind of different.
They're all chasing behind East Hartford, I think.
Right. I think East Hartford is strongly leading the pack.
Of course.
But I think what's unique is that you may hear a lot about those other cities. Yeah. They're larger, and they have maybe more resources, and you don't always hear a lot about East Hartford. And I think what's been Yet. Well, that's what I mean. Until recently, I think the really cool thing about East Hartford Connects and East Hartford being a recipient of this opportunity is that it's really shown a spotlight on East Hartford. And where sometimes other communities may struggle in bringing partners together, I think East Hartford was so excited to finally be in the spotlight that it deserves. So many partners kind of came out and have worked together so well because we're excited about the opportunity. We were selected maybe because of some demographics that weren't really strong, but I also think we were selected because of the potential that we have. And when partners are coming together in a way that they haven't before, I think we've been able to gain some success and some steam. We're just getting people in the room that should have known each other and should have been working together. We're just building relationships that make all of our jobs, I think, a little bit easier. So I think it's been a really cool thing for East Hartford, and to see and the so many cool people that I've met in East Hartford that are excited about it, whether they come to one meeting or they chair a board. People are really excited about it. Yeah,
and I think, Amy, there's a large piece of that bringing people together. Someone has to do that work. That doesn't happen on its own, and you've done a really remarkable job bringing people together. And one of my favorite parts of this is the dynamic relationship that's happened between the Board of Education and the town of East Hartford. And 2 agencies that you would think would be very connected and probably in a lot of ways are, but sometimes I think in a lot of cities across Connecticut just simply aren't. And I know you directly report to the mayor as well as to myself. And can you talk about how you've been able to help build that connection of agencies in town? You've mentioned CCAT and Goodwin College, and can you talk about how do you shape that? Like how do you make that happen?
I just ask. I think people are. I think people sometimes are hesitant to pick up the phone. I think looking at what people are doing and walking into a meeting or asking for a meeting with an ask of how can I make your job easier? I know you want to grow the wealth of this community in this way. And so do we. And how can we work together? And now we have these resources of the Fed to help kind of build out some ideas. I think this is a new pool of resources where people are always like, we don't have the money to do that. We've never done that before. That's different. I think you make the ask and people are either willing to participate and try or not. And then sometimes they find themselves still kind of in a silo. I think the school district and the board and you have been so wonderful. I've never heard you say no, which maybe I didn't
realize that was an option.
Well, that's a good thing.
I think that's the public defender thing.
Right. Yeah, maybe that's right. But I think, people who have been willing to try, from teachers who are willing to incorporate a new curriculum into their classroom to, working with the mayor on promoting the census and why that is such an important issue in East Hartford to growing the wealth of this community, making sure people are seen, making sure people are identified. And that's not easy because there are a lot of different communities within East Hartford. But the mayor really wants to bring people together. So she's brought a lot of partners to the table. So if people are willing to engage in partnership, and say yes and try something new, we have to figure it out and see how it goes. And I should include employers in that ask as well. I think there are some great employers in East Hartford that are top employers and run really successful businesses. And I think some people are hesitant to make an ask of employers, but they can't hire people fast enough.
Right.
So they need unique and different ways to look for their workers. And we have a great partnership with Intercommunity Health here in East Hartford, a great partnership with Sodexo, a great partnership with Freightliner. And whether they hire our individuals that we send to them or not, they're willing to come and speak at events and sit around the table and have these conversations to think about how we can work together. So I feel like I've been so lucky in my asks because so many people have said yes. So I'm just going to keep asking.
I think there's a lot to learn from that.
Yeah.
It's ask you shall receive kind of idea.
Yeah.
So I think too the other interesting thing, and what I'm really proud of with Working Cities East Hartford Connects is the idea of that we start to define communities by our assets versus our deficits, and I've seen that over and over. We start defining our neighborhoods by people who have something to offer versus our cost. And I think that's exactly the story of finding that underemployed person who could be employed in a different way if a certain barrier could remove, or finding that child who, when exposed to a career reality, will go on to do great things when given the exposure, or finding that resident who maybe feels alone. And through a resident advisory group starts realizing, no, you have a voice in how this solution is going to happen. I mean, that's the spirit of this move. Can you talk about, and I know there's been many, and you might want to do more than one, but just talk about one just really cool success that you've seen in the East Hartford Connect story over the past year of, as any initiative director, any leader, I love the metaphor of the seeds in the ground, right? We put them in the ground and we're like, God, I hope that thing works.
Yeah.
And you're waiting,
Right.
and hopefully you're not foolish enough to dig it back up again, but you water and you work, and all of a sudden something popped up and you're like, I can't believe this is acting. Well, of course, it's right in the ground. But, I know you've had those moments.
Yeah, so this is maybe a good place to talk about our Professional Skills Academy. This was really just kind of an idea that started in our design phase in talking with employers and talking to them about their needs. And they're saying, we will train people, but are people ready to go to work? Some people sometimes don't have what we call soft skills. I like to call them professional skills. Yeah. And in working with employers to identify those skills and looking for a local partner that can kind of help teach some of those skills, partnering with Goodwin College to do that, and then recruiting and talking to job seekers about this opportunity of going to Goodwin College for 3 weeks, a part-time course. Finish the course, you get credentials at Goodwin College. You're working with professors on a resume, on Microsoft Office skills, on conflict resolution. You're taking assessments. We have people come in from CCAT and from Capital Workforce Partners to talk about future opportunities. And we ran that with a cohort last spring. And we also worked with Goodwin College's Kid Care program to provide free child care. And we used our resources to offer transportation subsidies to people. And 18 people showed up to start and 18 people finished.
That's amazing.
And that's a huge thing.
Yeah.
Some of our folks had been either out of the workforce or unemployed for a long period of time. And we found that within 2 months of our participants completing this and kind of working through our job matching process after it was over, more than 50% of the folks who started had new jobs making on average more than $6 an hour than they were before.
That's amazing. Wow.
And you might not think that 50% is a lot, but I think if people were to even look at their own situation and think if I went out and got a new job, would I be making $6 more an hour that quickly? But I think it's because we've been able to be supportive in their process, but we also have, again, good partners at the table. And why it is a big success is we were able to get through it and now we're recruiting for our next one. And we've taken some of the things we've learned in the first one and changed some of them and taken some things out. We've brought new partners to the table. We have a new partner with Dress for Success, where women are going to go through their suiting program. So they're going to get brand new suits for their interviewing and for their actual, employment contact. So we've been able to take what we did, saw what worked, and now we're really getting into duplication phases of what can we do better and what's really going to stick. So it's going through our first year, so many things were new and exciting, and now we're going into our second year of what can we repeat in a way that's sustainable and do it better. So that's really exciting to kind of be starting the second phase of stuff.
So that's an incredible accomplishment. We think about size and scale and where things start, and to think about that for these families, these individuals, their lives are different. For me as someone who works in schools, I'm really happy to hear moms and dads, we get families back to work. That changes the stress levels at home. That changes the child's ability to learn at school.
Right.
And we start talking about how do we rebuild, how do we refine, how do we enhance communities that have so much to offer. It's through that. So let's take this to the really granular level, and as a kid, I grew up in a situation where unemployment were realities, and obviously the pain and the pain of that. So everyone, I think, knows people who is either experiencing things, going through that, or and needs help. So for families in East Hartford, they watch this show about East Hartford Connects, and they hear this and they're like, "Geez, I'd like to get involved. How do I get involved?"
Right. So you can call our office. The phone number is 860-622-5508. You can go on our website. It's accessible from the East Hartford Public Schools website or the town website under East Hartford Connects, and let us know what you're interested in. We have folks in our Resident Advisory Council who don't work. We've had people come in and out that are retired and they just want to be a part of the neighborhood association. So they come to those meetings and they want to go to financial literacy workshops, and they go to those things because they work for them. Throughout the summer, we hold community dinners, and they just want to come and gather and have a meal in their community and see their kids play. And so you can be involved in that level. If you're looking for employment or opportunity, you can give us a call. Our Professional Skills Academy, we have geared towards folks who have their GED or high school diploma, or are going to be taking those tests and getting those accreditations soon. But if you're not there yet, East Hartford Adult Education is a partner of ours, and we work with the director and can do a warm handoff to adult education if you need to sort of get to that level before moving on. But we have met with all kinds of people who have just graduated from high school and people who are in their 50s who participate. One person participated in our Professional Skills Academy last time because she was getting back into the workforce and had been in nursing school before. So there's really no parameters. And if you want to see, if you're a parent and you already have a job and you don't have time to be in a neighborhood association, but your child goes to East Hartford Public Schools, let us know what you'd like to see your child learning about to plan for their future. And it may already exist, or maybe we work with a school or a principal or a teacher to build that out so that your child is getting the experience that you think they might want to have. So we're very open. I'll kind of return to what I was talking about before. People should ask me, just like I reach out to partners to ask them. People should bring their asks to me because we have this opportunity. We have some resources and capacity right now, and we're willing to create. So, if there's any interest at all, please give our office a call, and we'll work with you where you're at.
Yeah, that was an awesome answer, and I can't underline that all 6 times.
Yeah.
It's the success of East Hartford Connects is the success of the residents who come and work with us, and work with you, and we couldn't be more interested in finding ways to help. And I really hope folks who see this take advantage of that, and I hope that they pass that on to someone else. this is an organization that's been built by the voices of the people that we serve. It's
Yeah.
not always like that.
Right.
That's very unique.
Yeah, I mean, we get calls. One of the things we've started asking people is, how did you hear about us?
Yeah.
And they'll say, I saw your flyer, where I get my nails done.
They saw you on East from the classroom.
Yeah, from the classroom, right. But we've had a lot of great promotional publicity. And they also hear from their friends or their neighbors who, oh, my neighbor went to your community dinner and won the raffle prize for their students' uniform clothes for the school year. And, they're the best connections are the ones that happen sort of word to word, friend to friend, neighbor to neighbor, because it helps to sort of establish a layer of trust that we want to build with people.
Yeah. And I would also say, too, another interesting thing, I know business owners in town are watching this, and, East Hartford is home of the supply line manufacturers, not only the big research centers and obviously Pratt & Whitney, but the smaller manufacturing lines.
Right.
And we know about the job needs in Connecticut. If you're looking for help regarding meeting those employment needs,
right.
You're a great person to contact as well.
Yes. I mean, for our Professional Skills Academy, I'll be reaching out to some of the employers that I know and maybe making asks of employers I'd like to get to know and looking for the skills that they're looking for. Yeah. And I tell the employers that I'm reaching out to is that you can consider us a first layer of selection. You are getting people who have been well trained, they've been assessed, and they want to work.
Right.
So that's, we're kind of an extension of your HR department.
Yeah.
We're helping to get you people that have the skills that you need or skills that you're willing to teach once they're in your door.
Right.
But, I've had employers just host sort of informational interviews with someone and had it not be the right fit, but are still interested in continuing to do that to find the person who might be the right fit. Yeah. So absolutely, we are a resource. And that's an area I'd love to grow. I'd love to have more employer partners so that we can just keep recruiting people or connect job seekers from other programs. But that's an area where we definitely have space to grow.
Yeah. So landing the plane here on From the Classroom, right? Here comes the finale question here, Amy. What's something you can tell our residents who have watched this show, and I know have had a lot of opportunity to learn a lot, as I've learned today. What's something that we might not know about you that would surprise us?
Okay.
Give us an interesting story or detail.
Okay. So at our Resident Advisory Council, we always do an interesting icebreaker, and we played Two Truths and a Lie a couple weeks ago. And nobody could figure mine out. But one of the things that was interesting is that I used to be an archery instructor.
No kidding.
Yes.
Is this a truth or a lie?
This is a truth. This is my truth. My lie was that I was bilingual in Polish. But I was a trained archery instructor, and I taught archery at one point.
No kidding. How in the world did you get into archery? Now I got to know.
So I was working at a summer camp, and they needed an archer instructor, so they sent me to train and get my certification and figure out how to do all the stuff. And it was actually really cool. It was fun. But
so you're kind of a Robin Hood.
Exactly. That is.
Well, that carried on for you. I guess that kind of carried on for you. So.
Yes.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show, and really appreciate all your work here in East Hartford.
Thank you.
And thanks for all you're doing.
Thanks. Lots of fun. Thanks.
So that's it from the Classroom. Thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate the time and super excited about the things going on here in East Hartford. We'll see you next time.